By 1944, the skies over Germany belonged to the Allies. The sound of the Reich's final days was the constant, terrifying drone of 1,000 bombers at a time. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of Europe, was just a shadow of its former self. Its fighters were hopelessly outmatched, and its veteran pilots were almost all gone. But down below, in secret factories and on hidden airfields, a revolution was taking shape. It was the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. It was faster and deadlier than anything the Allies had. On paper, it was the one weapon that could have clawed back the sky. In the spring of 1945, in one of the war's last great air battles, a tiny swarm of just 37 Me 262s climbed to meet a colossal force of hundreds of American bombers, backed by massive fighter escorts. The jets tore through the formations. German pilots claimed 12 bombers and a fighter for the loss of only 3 of their own. An incredible tactical victory. And yet, it barely changed anything. The bombers still hit their targets, and Germany kept burning. So why did this futuristic jet, this angel of death, instead of becoming its salvation, became the Luftwaffe's last desperate attempt to win the war in the sky? The story of the Me 262 starts not in the chaos of 1944, but way back in 1939, before the war even began. At the Messerschmitt Design Bureau, engineers were working on Project 1065, a radical new plane built around a technology that barely existed, the turbojet engine. The airframe itself, with its sleek body and slightly swept-back wings, came together pretty quickly. The real challenge was the engine. Germany was in a race to master this new frontier of flight, but turning a concept into a reliable engine was proving to be a nightmare. The intended BMW 003 jet engines were riddled with problems. In fact, the plane was ready long before its engines were. To test how it handled, the very first Me 262 prototype actually flew in 1941 with a regular old piston engine bolted to its nose, a comical placeholder for the power that was supposed to come. It wasn't until July 18, 1942, that an Me 262 finally flew under the power of 2 of the new Junkers UMO 004 jet engines. The test pilot was stunned. The aircraft was unbelievably fast, easily leaving any propeller-driven fighter in the dust. Soon after, the legendary fighter ace Adolf Galland flew a prototype and famously said, "It felt as if an angel was pushing." The potential was undeniable. Here was a plane that could outrun any Allied escort and carry enough firepower to rip a heavy bomber in half. But this breakthrough came with huge problems. Jet engines needed special, heat-resistant metals like nickel and cobalt, materials that were in desperately short supply in wartime Germany. This forced engineers to use lower-grade metals, a compromise that would have deadly consequences. So what made the Me 262 so revolutionary? In a sky full of propeller planes, it was like a visitor from another time. Clocking in at around 885 kilometers per hour, it was over 160 kilometers per hour faster than the American P-51 Mustang, one of the best Allied fighters. At those speeds, traditional dogfighting simply broke down. Propeller-driven fighters could not follow a jet through a climb or catch it in level flight. The Me 262 could disengage almost at will, turning speed itself into a form of protection. It could climb to its service ceiling of over 11,300 meters with incredible speed, letting its pilots decide exactly when and where to fight. This transformed air combat from a contest of maneuverability into one of timing and positioning, a glimpse of how jet warfare would be fought in the decades to come. Its power came from 2 Junkers UMO 004 jet engines, slung in pods under the wings. They didn't use high-octane aviation fuel. They burned a cruder, kerosene-like fuel called J2, which was easier for Germany to supply late in the war. But these engines were terrifyingly primitive. Because of the cheap metals used to build them, The average lifespan of an engine was often just 10 to 25 hours. Pilots had to be incredibly gentle with the throttle. Push it forward too fast, and you could flood the engine with fuel, causing it to catch fire or simply flame out. Throttle response was slow and unforgiving, especially during takeoff and landing. This made the jet a temperamental beast, particularly for the rookie pilots the Luftwaffe was forced to rely on in the final months of the war. And then there was the firepower. The standard fighter version, the Me-262A1, a Schwalbe, or Swallow, was armed with a devastating battery of 4 30mm Mk108 cannons mounted in the nose. These weren't machine guns, they were low-velocity cannons firing explosive shells designed for one thing: destroying heavy bombers. Just a few hits could tear the wing off a B-17 or shatter its fuselage. For attacking bomber formations, pilots also had access to R-4M rockets under the wings. Fired in a single massive salvo from outside the effective range of defensive guns, these rockets could rip open the tight bomber boxes, a tactic that Allied pilots had been using for years to increase the density of fire from defensive machine guns. The Me-262 was, by its very nature, a pure interceptor. Its speed, climb rate, and heavy guns made it the perfect weapon to fight the Allied bombing campaign that was systematically destroying German industry. Luftwaffe commanders like Adolf Galland saw this instantly and begged for mass production to start right away. But one man saw something else. Adolf Hitler, increasingly detached from reality and obsessed with revenge weapons, looked at the world's most advanced fighter and saw a bomber. He demanded the Me-262 be converted into a Schnellbomber, a fast bomber, to carry out surprise attacks on Allied targets. His air commanders were in disbelief. The Me-262 made for a lousy bomber. It couldn't carry a big payload, and its incredible speed made hitting anything accurately almost impossible without special equipment. But Hitler's order was absolute. For critical months in 1944, this obsession caused crucial delays and diverted resources into developing the Me-262A to a Sturmvogel, or Stormbird, a fighter bomber variant that carried two 250-kilogram bombs. While Allied bombers pounded Germany with impunity, a significant portion of the early effort was wasted trying to turn the perfect defensive fighter into an ineffective bomber. By the time Hitler finally relented and gave the fighter program top priority in late 1944, a crucial window had closed. Still, as the first dedicated jet fighter units, like the famed Jagdgeschwader 7, got up and running, the Me-262 immediately showed what it could do. German pilots developed entirely new tactics for their wonder weapon. They knew they couldn't win a turning dogfight against a nimble Mustang. Instead, they used the jet's incredible speed for slash-and-run attacks. They would dive on bomber formations from high above, make one devastating pass with cannons and rockets, and then hit the throttle to climb away, leaving the Allied escort fighters far behind. For Allied bomber crews, the appearance of these silent, shark-like jets was a nightmare. They were just a blur, attacking and disappearing before the gunners could even get a clean shot. The kill ratios, based on German claims, were impressive. Some estimates suggest Me-262 pilots shot down over 500 Allied aircraft for the loss of about 100 jets in air-to-air combat, though these numbers are based on pilot claims and are likely inflated. But for every tactical success, there was a brutal strategic reality. The Me-262's advanced technology was also its Achilles heel. The fragile engines needed constant maintenance from a supply chain that was already collapsing under Allied bombs. And the jets were never more vulnerable than during takeoff and landing. With the engines slow to respond, the planes were sluggish and clumsy as they approached their airfields. Allied pilots learned this fast, and rat-catching became a favorite tactic, patrolling near jet bases and pouncing on the 262s when they were at their most helpless. A huge number of jets weren't lost in epic dogfights, but were picked off while landing or strafed while they sat on the ground. Ultimately, the story of the Me-262 is a story of numbers. Germany managed to produce over 1,400 of these jets, which is remarkable under constant bombardment. But getting them from the factory to the front line was a whole other problem. Allied bombing of roads and railways meant that only a fraction, probably only a few hundred, ever actually saw combat. Even on their best days, the jet units were a pinprick against a tidal wave. That raid where a handful of jets claimed 12 bombers? Even if those claims were spot on against a force of over 1,000, that's a loss rate of barely 1%. It wasn't nearly enough to stop the bombing. Allied air supremacy was absolute. For every Me-262 that got into the air, the Allies could send dozens of fighters to hunt it down. Crippling fuel shortages, a lack of spare parts, and not enough pilots who could handle the tricky jet meant most of them never left the ground. The popular myth is that if the Me-262 had just arrived a year earlier, it could have changed the outcome of the war. But this ignores the deep-seated problems that plagued the program from day one. The reliance on scarce materials, the unreliable engines, and a shattered industrial base meant that Germany probably could never have produced the thousands of jets needed to truly challenge the Allies for control of the air. It was the right weapon at the wrong time, in a world where the conditions for its success had already been destroyed. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Me-262's brief, violent career came to an end. The Allies eagerly studied captured jets. Its advanced design, and German jet research as a whole, would heavily influence the next generation of American and Soviet fighters like the F-86 Sabre and the MiG-15, the planes that would define the jet age the 262 had kicked off. The Messerschmitt Me-262 remains one of the most fascinating aircraft of the Second World War. It was a machine of contradictions, a vision of the future born from a regime in its death throes. It was a revolutionary triumph of engineering, and, at the same time, a complete strategic failure. It was a weapon that could dominate the sky for a few fleeting moments, but was ultimately swallowed by a war that was already lost. It was, and always will be, the Luftwaffe's brilliant, desperate last hope. If you enjoyed this look at the dawn of the jet age, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories from military aviation history. And let us know in the comments what other wonder weapons you'd like to see us cover. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.